Hi, Amelia Lyons, Clinical Supervisor Trainer. This is the kind of third in a series of videos that I've been making on the EDI area, Equality, Diversity, Inclusion, on the Clinical Supervision Programme for Aneurin Bevan. And this one is entitled, it's a very short presentation, just 3 slides, what can I do about it? So we often then accept, well, there's a lot of issues around in relation to working with areas of racism, areas of prejudice in clinical supervision. What can I actually do about it? And then you get lists and lists of things. And so what I've tried to do is distill some of those lists that I've got in relation to these areas and try and sort of boil it down to some main themes to bear in mind as, in my example, as a sort of thinking, self-examining, white professional female. So it's coming from that perspective clearly. So I've distilled it into 4 main areas. What's going on inside me internally? How does that manifest in external behaviours? The acquisition of knowledge and the acquisition of skills. And then if I break that down even further, think about what's going on internally first. Well, what are my ethical beliefs? And if I believe in veracity and truth and things like that, then clearly I am going to be anti-discriminatory in all conscious ways, certainly. So what are my attitudes there? Am I prepared to be tolerant of discomfort, of hearing things that might be a bit uncomfortable to hear? It's analogous, actually. It reminds me of a friend of mine in AA. I remember talking to them, years ago, and they were sort of bothered that no matter how many times they'd apologized to their daughter, that she hadn't forgiven him really for his drunken ways and how he'd been in the home, and that really hurt him. He was really upset about that. And I sort of turned around to him and said, well, have you invited her to sort of sit down and talk to you about her experience of what you were like when you were drunk at home or on holiday when she was a small child or a teenager? Have you invited her to do that, and therefore have you sat through the discomfort of listening to what she's going to tell you? And no, he hadn't, and no, he was never going to. I mean, he didn't say, no, I'm never going to do that. He just didn't do it. So in a sense, you have to be prepared to tolerate hearing things that might be quite difficult. And then there's a sort of a willingness and a courage then to put yourself out and put out what might be your mistakes and listen to how the other person experiences you. So those are the kinds of attitudes, the tolerance of discomfort, if you like, as compared with the idea of white fragility, where the white person, because they're getting kind of upset and I'm not racist, it sort of closes down the conversation. They find it difficult to hear. Well, everybody finds it difficult to hear, but it's about being prepared to sort of tolerate and listen to what's happening and other people's experience, so that you can then at least have an opportunity to contribute to resolving the problem as opposed to just keeping it going. External behaviours. So with an open mind and an open heart, listening, listen and listen. So from the videos that I did with Sadila, one of the important things that she said at the end was she just wanted to be listened to. And that's often what people say, again, across the range of issues. People just want to be listened to, and we underestimate the power of really strong listening with an open mind and an open heart. The willingness to be vulnerable and fall over, as I call it. So what I've found when I've worked in a number of problem areas is if I'm willing to go back to the group or to the individual that I've worked with and share, this is what I think has happened. It might have been a mistake that I've made or something where I feel stuck and I think I'm probably doing something wrong or have done something, and to put it back into the conversation. And within that, I'm obviously making myself quite vulnerable. I may feel quite exposed in offering up the sort of the mistake, as it were, of which the other person may have been conscious of or may not have been that conscious of, in that sense. But that puts it back in the ring, and there's a willingness then to share from the other person what was going on for them and their perspective, and then for some sort of mutual learning to take place. Obviously, quite a lot of learning on my side because I was the one who made the error as such. But also, I think the other person feels respected because you've been prepared to sort of put back in, and you're trying to work on something, and they're in my experience are virtually always willing to rise to the occasion and meet you somewhere. So my experience of other people is of being very forgiving and very tolerant, but it's quite a painful thing, and it takes a bit of guts and courage to put out where you're at in the first place. Now then, I didn't quite know where to put this final point, diversity, which you could almost put under all of the titles, or diversity in friendships, diversity in involvement, diversity in reading, diversity in interests. So again, to quote Emmanuel Acho there, the idea of having different friends, that he said in his, when he had a group of white policemen in the room and said, when did you last invite black family round to dinner? And the answer was, well, never actually. And the idea of the proximity, the further away people are from you, the more likely you are to be sort of prejudiced. But if you bring them more into your life, then that it's more difficult to maintain a kind of prejudiced viewpoint. So if we can expose ourselves to a diversity of situations, diversity of involvements, friendship, reading, and so on, then we're much more likely to have a more open experience. Knowledge about history, so history of the people that we're working with, a willingness to research the culture as well. So that involves a bit of work, a bit of homework, a bit of commitment, but it can be more than rewarding if you're willing to do that. According to Bruns and Cruz, also the idea of assisting the patient or the supervisor in their culture. So, we need to think about, how helpful can we be within that person's culture, because it's not our job to judge that. It's a different culture. And what can we do to help people within their own culture? So that might be in a social work situation, for example, and it involves, again, a certain degree of knowledge, and that means we've got to go and find out what that's about. So again, it sort of involves a bit of homework on the knowledge side in order to find out more about people that we're working with. So doing our homework, being curious, finding out. Okay, so being willing to do that bit of extra work. Skills, over and over again, what I read in all the literature and everything that's going on is about being person-centered, about treating everyone uniquely on a case-by-case basis. obviously not being so driven by their culture that that's the only thing that you think about. You must first and foremost always think about individuals, and who is the individual in front of you and everything else that follows, and take your energy and your cue from the individual. And I hear that over and over again. It's the person first, and then, their culture and everything that they're bringing with them into the relationship. And, that we recognize that each individual that we're working with is as unique as the last person. So everybody is unique and has their own preoccupations. The other skill that I would say is something about bringing taboos into the room. So when I talk about permission giving, which sounds a bit patronizing on the one hand, but it's something about acknowledging the prejudices that are out there and kind of bringing them into the room in various ways so that the person feels that they have permission perhaps to talk about what might be preoccupying them, but they might be protecting you by not talking about it. Interesting if you look at on YouTube Black Psychoanalysts Speak, where some of them talk about their first experience of therapy in with sort of like a very smart white psychoanalyst who really doesn't want to hear about racism. And it's brought a smile to one of the guy's faces. I mean, a wry smile, of course, about, the naivety of that, really. I mean, yes, it might have been 20 or 30 years ago when that actually, the encounter actually happened. It's so ridiculous, isn't it, to think that cannot be part of your average black or brown person's experience, and to forbid it coming into the sessions is just madness. So there's something, though, that opposite that we might have to do in order to encourage it to come into the session, especially if you are on the white side of the divide, as I am. Then a person is going to have a lot of experiences that might prevent them wanting to bring something in that they feel might upset me. They might be concerned about my white fragility. Obviously, you have to respect that. You can't force people to talk about things that they don't want to talk about, but there's something also about trying to open up the space, decrease the silence, as Brooms and Crews put it, decrease the silence, decrease the isolation, and invite people to talk about their preoccupations there. Thank you. So here in this final slide, I've just put down the keywords to sort of hold in mind that I've kind of tried to, again, distill from the reading that I've done in this area. So, the idea of just being an ethical professional to begin with, the idea of tolerating one's own discomfort, the idea, attitudes and qualities of being willing and courageous, holding an open mind and heart, listening, appreciation of diversity. So to me, diversity is health in every sense of the word. And if we can include diversity of involvements and interests and friends and so on in our lives, all the better. Notion of history and knowledge and research, they're doing your homework. And the idea of person-centered phenomenology, which is about, treating everybody as a unique individual. So yes, they will have a certain culture that may be different to my own. And I need to understand that and explore that. But never forget, this is an individual, unique human being in front of me first and foremost. And that's who I'm with at the moment. Thank you.